11 disgusting Golden Age actresses you were tricked into liking. They were the dazzling goddesses of Hollywood's Golden Age, immortalized in glossy magazines, adored by millions, and worshipped as flawless icons of beauty and grace. With every close-up, they embodied elegance, perfection, and the very dream of stardom itself. But behind the shimmering lights and carefully staged smiles lay shocking truths the studios fought tooth and nail to bury. In this video, we're pulling back the velvet curtain to expose 11 Golden Age actresses whose off-screen lives were anything but glamorous. These weren't just difficult divas throwing tantrums. Their behavior ranged from cruel and abusive to downright horrifying, acts that would have destroyed their reputations had the public ever known. From vicious outbursts to humiliating treatment of staff and co-stars, these women built careers on lies carefully protected by powerful studios and a complicit media machine. The most disturbing part? You were never supposed to know. For decades, you were tricked into admiring them while the people closest to them suffered in silence. These weren't isolated incidents excused as artistic temperament. They were dark, consistent patterns of abuse, deliberately hidden to preserve Hollywood's most valuable illusions. Every dazzling performance on screen was matched by a disturbing reality once the cameras stopped rolling. By the end of this countdown, you'll realize that the greatest roles these women ever played weren't in the movies at all. They were the fake personas sold to generations of unsuspecting fans. Because Hollywood's Golden Age didn't just create stars, it created myths. And behind those myths lurked the darkest secrets of all. But before we dive into this shocking list, here's something brighter. I'm giving away a $10 Amazon gift card to one random subscriber who comments below. Just tell me which of these stars shocked you the most, and you're entered. Now, let's uncover the ugly truths behind the glamour. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford, Hollywood's most terrifying mother. For decades, she reigned as one of the silver screen's brightest stars, a rags-to-riches legend who clawed her way out of an abusive childhood to become an Oscar-winning icon. To the public, Crawford was the very definition of the American dream. Fan magazines gushed over her as the picture-perfect mother, publishing glossy photos of bedtime stories and birthday cakes with her adopted children gathered around, smiling for the camera. But behind those staged smiles hid a nightmare. According to her daughter Christina's explosive memoir Mommy Dearest, Joan was no loving mother, she was a tyrant. Crawford allegedly unleashed terrifying rages, beating her children with coat hangers, yanking them from bed in the middle of the night to scrub floors, and once hacking off Christina's hair simply for daring to imitate her glamorous poses. The most infamous outburst became Hollywood legend, Crawford shrieking, "No wire hangers," before savagely beating her daughter and destroying her belongings. That phrase, burned into pop culture, became a chilling shorthand for maternal cruelty. The studios knew the truth, or at least pieces of it. MGM and later Warner Brothers worked tirelessly to protect their star, spinning her volcanic temper as discipline, her cruelty as perfectionism. They propped up the image of a devoted mother while silencing whispers of abuse. And so, for generations, the public adored a woman who, behind closed doors, allegedly terrorized the very children she used as props to polish her fame. Hollywood gave us a dream. But Christina's memoir shattered the illusion, leaving behind one of the most disturbing legacies in cinema history. A star whose brilliance on screen may have masked a darkness too horrifying to imagine. Shirley Temple. Shirley Temple, America's eternal sweetheart with a shadowed legacy. No star ever embodied innocence more completely than she did, with those perfect curls, that dimpled smile, and a talent far beyond her years. In the depths of the Great Depression, she was the nation's beacon of hope, a child whose films lifted spirits when everything else felt broken. Later, she reinvented herself as a polished diplomat, a woman of dignity and principle in the public eye. But beneath that shining image lay troubling truths. In her later years, Temple reportedly used her influence not to protect the vulnerable, but to shield Hollywood's most powerful figures accused of abuse. Instead of breaking the silence for child actors like herself, she allegedly became a defender of the very system that exploited them. Even in her own autobiography, she described, almost casually, how a producer exposed himself to her when she was just 12. To her, it seemed like part of the business. That normalization of misconduct carried into her response when others came forward with their own harrowing stories. What makes Shirley Temple's story so unsettling is not just the exploitation she endured, but how her image was later weaponized to defend Hollywood's darkest secrets. The little girl who once symbolized purity and hope became, in some accounts, a protector of predators. The chasm between the sweet, smiling child star and the adult figure allegedly complicit in silencing victims is proof of just how deeply Hollywood could twist innocence into a shield for its own corruption. Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr, the brilliant mind's dark final act. She wasn't just beautiful, she was mesmerizing, once hailed as the most beautiful woman in the world. But Hedy Lamarr was more than a face for the silver screen. She was a mind ahead of her time. She co-invented the frequency hopping technology that would one day evolve into Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS. A dazzling starlet and an overlooked genius, her dual legacy has made her a feminist icon. Yet behind the polished legend lies a darker, far less glamorous truth. Lamarr's later years were not filled with admiration but with chaos. Her behavior turned increasingly erratic, punctuated by arrests for shoplifting and violent outbursts against employees. Former assistants described life under her roof as a nightmare, where sudden rages, verbal lashings, and unpredictable moods made every day terrifying. Retail workers and service staff weren't spared either. Stories abound of Lamarr physically lashing out at clerks she accused of staring, and cruelly berating fans who approached her for a simple autograph. Modern biographies have largely recast Lamarr as the misunderstood genius, her brilliance overshadowed by her beauty. But in that reframing, the raw truth often gets buried. The pain of those who endured her aggression, erased in favor of a sanitized tale that fits neatly into inspirational narratives. History prefers its heroes polished, not complicated. But in Lamarr's story, genius and cruelty coexisted, and the final act of her life forces us to confront a reality far less romantic than the legend we've been told. Tallulah Bankhead, the wild child's vicious reality. Tallulah Bankhead has long been celebrated as a rebellious pioneer, an audacious woman whose sharp wit, smoky drawl, and unapologetic bisexuality carve her place as a trailblazer decades before the world was ready. To many, she is remembered as a free spirit who lived boldly and authentically in an age of suffocating conformity. But behind the myth of the eccentric icon lies a far darker truth. Bankhead's charm was often reserved for those she considered equals. For anyone she deemed beneath her, especially staff, stagehands, and black employees, her cruelty was legendary. Accounts describe vicious outbursts, laced with shocking racist tirades that cut deeper than the norms of even her own prejudiced era. Her temper wasn't just theatrical, it was destructive. In one infamous episode, after her demands weren't met fast enough, she allegedly urinated on a dressing room floor in a fit of rage. Actors who shared the stage with her spoke of fear, sabotage, and psychological warfare. If she felt upstaged, she would deliberately wreck performances, turning entire productions into nightmares. Yet Hollywood's publicity machine eagerly spun this torment into eccentricity, recasting abuse as unpredictable genius. This is the hidden cost of Tallulah's legend. While the industry packaged her as a witty rebel and an early queer icon, it also buried the testimony of those who endured her cruelty. Her legacy is not just one of defiance, but also of unchecked privilege and rage, an uncomfortable reminder of how easily Hollywood could turn viciousness into marketable glamour. Please don't play governance. I haven't your unyielding good taste. Bette Davis. Bette Davis, the queen of the backstabbers. For decades, Hollywood painted her as a fearless trailblazer, the sharp-tongued actress who fought the studio system and demanded respect for women in film. She became a feminist icon, immortalized by her willingness to play unsympathetic characters and by that legendary line, "Fasten your seat belts. It's going to be a bumpy night." But behind the empowering narrative was a far darker truth. Davis's reputation for toughness often masked something more ruthless, a calculated pattern of sabotage. Colleagues recalled how she spread vicious rumors, pulled strings to have rivals cut from roles, and even weaponized her influence to crush the careers of young actresses before they had a chance to rise. On set, she was accused of playing psychological games, whispering poison before important scenes, manipulating lighting to flatter herself at the expense of co-stars, and convincing directors to trim others' best moments in the editing room. Her battles with Jack Warner are remembered as brave stands against a patriarchal system, but her treatment of less powerful women told a different story. Davis didn't want to dismantle Hollywood's hierarchy, she wanted to rule it. And she was willing to step on anyone to stay at the top. Over time, the industry cleverly reframed her ruthless tactics as admirable ambition, recasting destruction as determination. Generations of fans were encouraged to celebrate her strength without ever facing the uncomfortable truth. that Davis's greatest victories often came at the cost of other women's dreams. Wonderful, if one could believe it. The loveliest story ever told, until you look behind the curtain. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo, the Ice Queen's hidden cruelty. Greta Garbo's aloof mystique and her famous plea to be left alone have long been painted as the noble defenses of a fragile artist drowning in the glare of fame. Hollywood polished her reclusiveness into legend, turning her refusal to play the publicity game into a symbol of authenticity in an industry built on illusion. But behind that carefully curated image of enigmatic elegance lay a far darker truth. Former household staff describe a chilling atmosphere inside Garbo's private world, one ruled not by silence, but by fear. Beneath her public dignity, Garbo allegedly wielded cruelty like a blade, lashing out at assistants with cutting remarks and sudden verbal assaults over the smallest mistakes. New staff were reportedly subjected to humiliating tests, assigned impossible tasks only to be berated mercilessly when they failed. Her words, sharp and deliberate, could leave employees in tears, shattering their confidence and dignity in a single breath. While the public saw an artist who shunned the spotlight, those who worked closest to her saw a woman who used privacy as a shield, protecting not her soul, but her cruelty. Hollywood, ever the master of illusion, reframed her coldness as grace and her abuse as eccentric genius. In doing so, the industry crafted one of its greatest myths, that Garbo's brilliance excused the suffering of those forced to endure her wrath. Veronica Lake, the peekaboo blonde's darker side. Veronica Lake's peekaboo hairstyle wasn't just a fashion statement. It was an era-defining symbol of 1940s Hollywood glamour. With her sultry presence in film noir classics, she became one of the most recognizable stars of her generation. But behind the shimmering facade of fame, her story spiraled into alcoholism, mental illness, and financial ruin. Hollywood lore has long painted Lake as a fragile victim of the ruthless studio system, a fallen angel who deserves sympathy instead of judgment. Yet, that narrative hides a far more disturbing truth. According to colleagues and crew members, Lake's alcoholism didn't only destroy her, it lashed out at others. Reports describe violent outbursts on set, drunken rages where she allegedly struck makeup artists, shoved costume designers, even attacked fellow actors. As her career declined, the behavior only worsened. Some recalled her stumbling into performances visibly intoxicated, and in shocking accounts, even urinating on stage. For those who endured her cruelty, these weren't simply the symptoms of a woman in pain. They saw someone who used her addiction as a weapon, excusing cruelty with tragedy. But history has a way of rewriting monsters into martyrs. In the decades since her death, Lake has been repackaged as a broken beauty undone by a merciless industry, while the voices of her alleged victims have been muted, erased from the story. The gulf between the myth and the reality is staggering. Veronica Lake, once hailed as Hollywood's delicate, damaged doll, may also have been its unacknowledged tormentor. In turning her into a romantic tragedy, Hollywood performed one of its most successful posthumous rehabilitations, polishing cruelty into sympathy and leaving the true victims forever voiceless. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow, the platinum blonde icon draped in scandal. Jean Harlow's rise as Hollywood's first true blonde bombshell and her tragic death at just 26 cemented her as an immortal symbol of beauty and loss. To this day, the public prefers to remember her as the dazzling starlet chewed up by the studio system, talented, exploited, and gone too soon. It's a story designed to evoke sympathy. But behind that romanticized narrative lies a darker tale that few dare to mention. Whispers from her contemporaries suggest that Harlow was far more calculating than the legend allows. She was accused of planting vicious rumors, stories of sexual misconduct, fabricated failures, and scandals carefully designed to ruin her rivals. Promising newcomers were drawn in by her charm, only to later discover they had been set up. Accounts claim she would invite them to parties, encourage behavior that would tarnish their reputations, then leak the fallout to gossip columnists while feigning sympathy. Former colleagues described her as a master manipulator who used MGM's favoritism not just to protect her own status, but to quietly sabotage the careers and the sanity of other women. Yet her early death wiped the slate clean, allowing Hollywood to rebrand her from alleged saboteur to tragic victim. By glorifying her beauty, her talent, and her untimely end, the industry erased the pain of those who claimed to have been destroyed by her ambition. Jean Harlow's story is not just one of glamour and tragedy, it's also one of Hollywood's most successful image makeovers, a reminder that behind every shining legend may lie a trail of broken dreams. Zsa Zsa Gabor. Zsa Zsa Gabor, the glittering grifter. With her dazzling gowns, thick Hungarian accent, and razor-sharp one-liners, Zsa Zsa Gabor carved out a place in pop culture as the ultimate camp icon. To the world, she was a flamboyant diva, married 9 times, always draped in diamonds, always ready with a witty remark. Hollywood celebrated her as performance art incarnate, a living caricature of excess and glamour. But behind the feather boas and glitzy facade lay a much darker story. In 1989, Gabor's arrest for slapping a Beverly Hills police officer briefly pulled back the curtain. What should have been scandalous became a comedy routine. She laughed it off, sold cheeky, free Zsa Zsa t-shirts, and turned her misconduct into merchandise. Yet, not all of her controversies could be so easily spun into jokes. Former housekeepers came forward with harrowing stories of verbal tirades and physical assaults. One even claimed she was struck repeatedly over the smallest cleaning mistake. Multiple lawsuits followed, yet the industry brushed it off as Zsa Zsa being Zsa Zsa, chalking it up to her fiery, Hungarian temperament. Equally troubling were repeated accusations of financial exploitation. Business partners and service providers alleged she conned them, skipped bills, and used her celebrity status to dodge responsibility. When cornered, she leaned on her crafted persona, the ditzy, glamorous foreigner who couldn't possibly be taken seriously, as a shield against accountability. Perhaps the most astonishing part of Zsa Zsa Gabor's legacy isn't her diamonds or marriages, but Hollywood's success in reframing her behavior. Violence became diva drama. Exploitation became savvy business. And abuse was camouflaged as campy theatrics. In the end, Zsa Zsa didn't just play a role. She mastered the art of turning scandal into spectacle, teaching Hollywood how to laugh off what, in any other context, would have been unforgivable. Joan Fontaine. Joan Fontaine, the sweet-faced saboteur. On screen, she was the very image of innocence, soft-spoken, delicate, a woman audiences longed to protect. With Oscar-winning turns in Rebecca and Suspicion, Joan Fontaine carved out a place in Hollywood history as the fragile heroine, the one whose quiet elegance stood in stark contrast to the flashy glamour of her rivals. But behind that porcelain smile lurked a far darker truth. For decades, Hollywood painted Fontaine's feud with her sister, the equally legendary Olivia de Havilland, as little more than a playful sibling rivalry. The reality, according to insiders, was far more sinister. Fontaine allegedly waged a calculated campaign to sabotage Olivia's career and happiness. She whispered poison into the ears of directors, spread rumors to producers, and swooped in for roles she knew her sister coveted. Even off set, the cruelty continued. Fontaine publicly belittled her sister's performances, mocked her choices, and, in the most shocking betrayal, made cutting remarks in the wake of their mother's death. While Olivia de Havilland carried herself with dignity, those close to the sisters described Joan's obsession as relentless, even pathological. What the industry brushed off as sisterly competition was, in truth, sustained psychological warfare, behavior that, in any other context, would be recognized as abuse. Yet Hollywood wrapped it in a bow of glamour, turning cruelty into a curiosity and malice into entertainment. And so, the sweet-faced star who won an Academy Award for playing the vulnerable victim may, in reality, have been one of Tinseltown's most ruthless predators, proof that sometimes, the darkest stories are hidden behind the gentlest smile. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich, the predatory icon. Marlene Dietrich's name still glitters with allure. With her androgynous style, unapologetic sexuality, and fierce defiance of Nazi Germany, she became a symbol of rebellion decades before such defiance was celebrated. Hollywood framed her as a progressive trailblazer, a woman ahead of her time who lived authentically and fearlessly. But behind the glamorized legend lies a much darker truth. According to multiple accounts, Dietrich allegedly exploited her immense influence to prey on younger women in the industry. Aspiring actresses whispered about the pressure to enter sexual relationships with her. Promises of career advancement dangled before them, only to be mocked behind closed doors by Dietrich herself. Staff members, makeup artists, costume designers, assistants, reported being shredded by her sharp tongue. Humiliated over their looks, talent, or intelligence, many were reduced to tears by the woman the world hailed as a champion of the marginalized. What the public saw as liberated sexuality, others described as a predatory dynamic. Rejection could mean career sabotage. Acceptance meant surrendering to a power imbalance so stark it left scars that Hollywood has long refused to acknowledge. The myth of Dietrich as a feminist icon became one of the industry's most successful rewrites of history. Her cruelty reframed as eccentricity, her exploitation buried beneath the glow of a progressive image. This pattern wasn't unique to Dietrich. From Joan Crawford's alleged abuse of her children to Tallulah Bankhead's racist tirades, from Bette Davis's sabotage of rivals to Barbara Lamar's spirals of violence, Hollywood spun destructive behavior into marketable myth. Violence was branded as passion. Sabotage was praised as ambition. Abuse was reframed as rebellion. These weren't just stars with difficult personalities. These were women whose actual behavior starkly contradicted the admirable qualities carefully packaged by studio publicists. And the public believed it. Fans clung to carefully staged images, choosing denial over truth when confronted with memoirs, arrest records, or eyewitness accounts. These deceptions did more than protect careers. They rewrote womanhood itself, dictating narrow versions of what acceptable female strength and freedom could look like. That system didn't end with the Golden Age. Its legacy lives on today, reshaped by Instagram posts, charity campaigns, and authentic social media snapshots that are just as manufactured as MGM's publicity shots. Stars like Ellen DeGeneres built empires on kindness while hiding toxic workplace allegations. Others, like Asia Argento, reveal how easily celebrity culture ignores the fact that women, too, can be both victims and perpetrators. The lesson is chilling. Hollywood's great machine never just created stars, it created illusions. Illusions so powerful they silenced the voices of those exploited in the shadows. Illusions that still dictate how we see women in the public eye today. This revelation forces us to look at modern celebrity culture with sharper eyes, challenging not just the authenticity of individual stars, but the very values and myths their polished images were built to sell. And there you have it, 11 of Hollywood's most beloved Golden Age actresses, women who the world adored, yet whose carefully crafted personas often concealed troubling, even abusive, private realities. From Joan Crawford's icy perfection to Marlene Dietrich's untouchable glamour, from Shirley Temple's angelic innocence to Zsa Zsa Gabor's dazzling charm, behind the curtain were behaviors that contradicted the very virtues that made them icons. What makes these stories so unsettling isn't just the dark truths themselves, it's the powerful machinery that kept them hidden. Studio fixers silenced victims. Publicists spun lies into legend. Journalists looked the other way, publishing fiction instead of fact, all to protect the industry's most profitable illusions. So we have to ask, which of these revelations shook you the most? Were you already aware of these whispers from Hollywood's past, or is this the first time you're hearing these darker truths? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to know how this changes the way you see these once untouchable leading ladies. And if you want more untold stories from the Golden Age, truths hidden beneath the glittering silver screen, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Golden Legacy. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.